Okay, another video. This time about a topic that is really fucking annoying. It's called the deficit. Scary, I know. Deficits are scary. But in reality, no, they are not. Why? Okay. Every person, like countries, Mr. Burns, and Homer Simpson, have assets and liabilities. And countries have the same. What are the assets of a country? And what are the liabilities of the country? The liabilities are public debt, some form of municipal debt, no idea how it's written, and then there's private debt. Mostly the private debt tends to be bigger than the public debt. Private. Okay. Then, what are the assets? Infrastructure, and then you have land mostly, and the next one is taxable wealth. And wealth, of course. Actual wealth, not government-owned wealth. But that's the same kind of. You technically can tax all the wealth. I mean, you can technically introduce communism. That's also the same. Okay, let's don't get diverted. That's how it works. But individuals and countries and companies have different kind of debt. Individuals, countries, companies. The hardest people who can not take debt easily are individuals. Every time you go to a bank, they charge you a risk premium. Or they will refuse to give you money at all. But countries, they have, because they take such huge quantities of debt, they take really big quantities of debt, they raise debt differently. They sell bonds, selling bonds. So a part of their debt comes from selling bonds. But sometimes an even bigger part of the debt can come from the central bank, who sets interest rates, and who sometimes purchases even its own debt. Purchases own debt. Also, it's part of the finance ministry in most countries. In the US, it's called treasury. So, let's say the main interest rate is 3%. Usually, the government can borrow long-term bonds at 4%. Companies, probably a bit expensive, 6%, and these people can need probably 7 or even 8. especially if this isn't a real estate. No real estate. And especially if they borrow a lot, and especially if they have no prior assets, then this interest is really, really fucking high. And every time these people have difficulties paying their debt back, they get bankrupt. While this guy, a country, if he can't pay his debt back, he says, central bank, please give us money. So the central bank gives them money. Or they cut spending. So this is spending and they cut it. This part goes away. And this creates a recession. And then the central bank lowers interest rates. And then, because the interest rates are lower, it can again spend more spending. So countries, if they get in debt, paying back debt is far easier than individuals. That's important. And companies are somewhere in the middle. Some can sell bonds if they are big enough, like Apple, and some can't because they are too small. Like small companies, they usually can't issue that many bonds or sell them at all. So they mostly go to banks. While a bank has an easier time evaluating whether Apple can pay his debt back, for individuals it's kind of hard. That's why they charge more interest here. Okay, so how to measure the risk of debt? Usually, countries own public assets. If the public assets exceed the debt level, then usually the debt is no issue because there's a surplus. If there's some debt, like let's say 100% of GDP, and it's not covered by all the assets, then it's kind of fine too. But the real issue isn't debt or anything else. The real issue is, in this case, something else. Let's say you are a country. You are, let's say, a country that is unknown. Let's take the United States. And you get money with 3% interest. But then you are a fucking moron and spend it on something with a 2% return. A 2% inflation including return. Then you are stupid, because that's money waste. You basically lose 1%. So that kind of debt is stupid debt, unproductive debt. While good debt has a return of, let's say, 5%. If you have a 5% return, you get 2% back. And if you pay the central bank back, you get the difference, the 2%. So that's the important thing. That's important. But it's also a bit more difficult than you think, because if you spend a lot of money, if the government spends a lot of money, you create inflation. That makes your debt burden less, lowers debt burden, but hurts economy too. Hurts economy. So ideally, the real issue is don't spend on stuff that creates inflation and unproductive assets. So, let's give an example of an unproductive kind of spending. Retirements. Okay, now I might sound like an evil guy, but retirements are technically unproductive spending. Usually, you want to maximize this thing. But if you pay people money just for sitting at home, you reduce the labor supply. So people are less willing to work. In that sense, retirement spendings are stupid. But some retirement spending is probably necessary because people get sick and old. Sick and old. So the thing is, given that people get sick and old, you ideally want them to have some amount of retirement. But you don't want them to have 100% of what they would earn, usually if they would work. You want them to have some amount of that. Probably something like enough that they can eat, have a shelter and sleep, but not enough that they have the most comfortable life and can go on cruise ships. So you want the utility to be somewhere here. That should be the utility of them. Like here they are dirt poor. You don't want your elders to be that much poor. This is stupid. But you also don't want them to be that much rich that they can spend recklessly and create inflation. So that's the thing. That's a stupid spending. Other stupid spendings. Military. Why is it stupid? Because you buy with military spending depreciating assets. Some of those depreciating assets are necessary because you need to defend your countries. But excessive military spending is stupid because you get a bunch of tanks, you get a bunch of guns. Okay, that's a very disgusting looking gun that nobody needs and that over time fall in value. So that's also stupid spending. What's smart spending? Bridges, schools, railroads. These are smart spendings as long as they produce a 2% return more or less on your economy, or 1% return. The return isn't that much important with them because they tend to have a global impact on your economy, a global positive impact in the sense that this will lower transportation costs and rise your GDP figures. GDP. So, yeah, that's the story about it.